are college students across the country using free speech to limit free speech? Many of us college students don't want to hear offensive language, hate speech, microaggressions, opposing viewpoints, and sensitive material, and are fighting for protection against them. But for the greater good of this nation, it's best that we protect our rights to speak freely, even if it means respecting and listening to viewpoints we don't agree with, and discussing topics that make us uncomfortable. A conservative but influential speaker came to my high school last year, and I, as well as others, refused to attend and listen because I had different political viewpoints than he did. But to this day, I have absolutely no idea what he said, and I will never know what he said because I refused. I will never have that additional knowledge to use to my benefit. If we are unwilling to understand different perspectives, how can we critically think and argue for our own positions? Jonathan Cole, a professor at the University at Columbia, says there's been a recent trend of students protesting against speakers coming to their schools. Brown University, Johns Hopkins University, Williams College, Haverford College, and so many others have withdrew speaking invitations because students protested against them and they just didn't agree with them. Another incident happened at Middlebury College, where a professor invited a speaker whom he thought that the students should hear from, regardless of the fact that they had different views. Well, the students yelled at the speaker, Charles Murray, yelled at him, "Who is the enemy? White supremacy," as well as hate speech. The students violently broke out, and they succeeded in canceling the lecture. This is a problem. Listening to every opinion means we can critically decide for ourselves which one we believe is closest to the truth. And hearing one side of the spectrum limits how far and how deep we can think. An analogy is that certain species of shrimp are said to see colors that we can't even fathom. But until we see through their own eyes, it's impossible for us to imagine them. Shutting off different opinions only creates limitations. Similarly, excluding ourselves from difficult but important issues hinders our ability to make sense of how these issues took shape and how we can prevent them in the future. One of University of Wisconsin's political science professors states, quote, "We have a right to be challenged with ideas that are not easy and may hurt us. We deserve nothing less if we expect to find the truth," unquote. Slavery happened, World War II happened, racism is still a problem, we almost went through nuclear war, etc. Hearing and seeing these hard truths really hurt, but it motivates us to enact change. And arguably, much if not all of the greatest changes made throughout history are a result of speaking freely. Would segregation laws have ended if we couldn't speak up? Would we be able to love and marry the people we wanted to if we couldn't speak up? The list goes on. On a separate note, most college institutions have speech codes and speech zones and are going against the First Amendment. These are policies that restrict what students can say and constrains the area in which total free speech can take place. VCU is a yellow light school, according to the Foundation of Individual Rights in Education, meaning we actually have speech restrictions. However, they are unclear and unsubstantial. But 36.9% of 449 colleges surveyed are red schools, meaning they have speech restrictions that are unambiguously unconstitutional. University of Cincinnati, for example, required pre-registration for protest at least 10 work days in advance, and the speech zone was a mere 0.1% of the entire campus. This means if we wanted to protest, for example, sending soldiers overseas, they could have landed before we even got to protest. And this is a place of education. We need to be able to talk to one another and say what we want to in order to learn. We have a right to speak freely when and where we want to, under the protection of the First Amendment. Not to mention, America is built on the ideals of democracy, and one of the 8 key elements of democracy is freedom of speech. Atifete Yayaga, the first female president of the Republic of Kosovo, articulates, quote, "Democracy must be built through open societies that share information. Where there is information, there is enlightenment. Where there is debate, there are solutions. When there is no sharing of power, no rule of law, and no accountability, there is abuse, corruption, subjugation, and indignation," unquote. Democracy works because everyone can contribute their ideas and everyone brings something different to the table, which one person or a few people alone just can't do. I will admit, I'm a liberal and immediately want to shut down anyone who supports Trump. But what good does that do me and others if we shut down new and different ideas? And I also don't want to say that we should create an unsafe space by not standing up for what we believe in, by protesting and arguing against what we think is wrong and hateful. We actually need to be doing more of that. However, we need to be able to critically and civilly, yes, civilly, argue with reasoning and not celebrate ignorance. This means it's time for us students to stand up for our rights to free speech for the good of our generation and our future. Okay, on the count of 3, I want everyone to yell their names at me. 1, 2, 3. Madonna! Great. So, that being said, everyone here has a voice, and everyone here needs to use it. But next time, just listen to everybody else. Thank you.